Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and today marks the glorious return of resin 3D printing here on the channel. And to help me welcome back resin 3D printing is this beast of a machine right here. Now, this is the latest resin 3D printer from HeyGears. It is called the HeyGears UltraCraft Reflex RS, and the RS stands for Rapid Shaper. Now, this is a follow-up to the previous model, which from this point on, I'm just going to call it the UltraCraft Reflex, referring to the previous model. They've taken some things that they've learned from that model and applied it to this version here. They've added some things, they've taken some things away, but the whole goal is to make a professional level 3D printer that is suitable for you to use in your home or your workspace, that's capable of producing some rapid prototyped figures or designs that you come up with yourself, that you can print them with the proper parameters within like 2 hours. So if you want to still get some really nice detailed prints, especially for things like statues or miniatures, this machine can cover all of those bases. Now, there is a lot to go over with this printer, but before I do, I need to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, I need to let you know that this printer, the wash station, the cure station, the resin, pretty much everything that you're going to see here hardware-wise was kindly provided to me by HeyGears for the purpose of making this video, showing you the printer, showing you my experience with the printer, and helping you to make an informed decision about whether or not you want to purchase it. And if you do decide that you want to purchase it, they made the price pretty attractive, especially compared to the original UltraCraft Reflex. Now, they're doing this special launch period promotion where you can get this printer for $799. That is the early bird pricing for this. And they also gave me a discount to give to you. So if you want to buy it and you want to support the channel, you can check the link in the description. It's going to take $50 off. So $750 for this printer here. They also have an RS combo available that comes with this printer, as well as the wash station and the cure station. And then the early bird price for that, I got it right here on my notes, is going to be $1686. All right. And then also you get that $50 off if you use that link. And then the regular price on this is going to be $2,107 if you wait until after the promotional period ends. So just a little food for thought. All right, so let's go over some specs, and I'm going to tell you the differences between this model and the original UltraCraft Reflex. Starting off with the screen, the RS model has a larger and higher resolution screen. It is a 10.3-inch monochrome screen that is also 8K. The UltraCraft Reflex before it was a 9.25-inch screen with a 6K resolution. So it is a better screen. You're also getting a smaller footprint overall, which means this printer is not as big as the previous model, but it gives you a little bit larger build volume. They've also made it lighter. It's about 11 pounds lighter than the one before it. And you still keep the software features that really makes this printer what it is. It is dead simple to set up. It pretty much does auto everything. From the moment you plug it in, it's going to do everything that for itself. You don't even have to worry about changing the settings at all. They've really made this really kind of foolproof as far as resin 3D printing goes. If you're interested in power, this draws 180 watts of power. The previous model draws 350 watts of power. And also, if you're interested in the nanometer light source, this one uses a 405 nanometer light source, and the previous one was using a 385 nanometer light source. But the software side of things is pretty much the same. This printer has Z compensation to help to cut down on deformities when it comes to prints. It can also detect residue while you're printing. So in case you have a failure, it'll be able to detect that down to 0.2 millimeters and stop the print if it detects that a failure has occurred. And this printer, the previous one, still used the same proprietary slicer called Blueprint, and that takes care of everything for you. Another thing that may be important to you depending on where you live in the world is a heated resin vat. This printer does not come with a heated resin vat right out of the box. It is available as an optional add-on accessory that you can buy, but it's not available straight out of the box, as opposed to the previous model where you could just start heating your resin. It was already a built-in feature. But this also uses the same resin bottle, which is basically like a big ink cartridge that you can just slide into the back of the printer, and it's got this ball in it, and when the ball comes into contact with this pointy plastic piece at the back of the vat, it pushes that ball up and the resin will start to flow into the vat, and when it reaches a certain level, it will just automatically stop putting resin into the vat. And as you use resin, it's going to just fill the tank and fill the tank until there is nothing left in this bottle. That is something that the previous model does as well, but this model does not have the floodgate, if you will, that opens and closes as the resin is coming through. It's just wide open all the time, but I didn't have to worry about any kind of spills or anything like that from an overflowing tank. So the system with the ball and the plastic piece, it still works just fine. And this printer is also pretty cool to look at when it's turned on. You can probably hear it gurgling away right now, but it's got these cool orange lights on the inside, and it really helps to add to the ambiance of the room that you're printing in. But at the same time, this is a pretty shaded door that flips up just like this. And it's advised that you don't open it while you're printing. The printer tells you not to do that. And if you do, at the end of the print, it tells you, hey, something might be a little bit messed up because you opened the door and we told you not to. But yeah, it does have that feature as well. And I do love the flip up lid like that. And while it's printing, it's not a loud printer, but as it's just sitting here on standby, you are going to hear it just kind of gurgling away. The user interface is also really simple to understand, and in fact, since this printer does so many things automatically, I didn't find myself spending a whole lot of time in the menu system like that, except for doing things like checking for firmware updates and updating the printer, which, by the way, it does have built-in Wi-Fi, so you can get your updates pulled down from the cloud. If you want, you can send your files over your local area network directly to the printer, or you can send them up to the cloud and then it'll go down into the printer. And there's also a micro SD card slot on the side as well. And that's where the power plug is going to be. That's where the power switch is going to be. The printer is also compatible with the air compression module that HeyGears sells, along with the special vat that goes along with it. And with that, you'll be able to reduce the peeling force of the film on the bottom of the vat, and then that in turn should lead to some faster print times as well as some finer supports so that you can more easily take your supports off of your model. But that, just like with the previous model, is an optional add-on that you can choose to buy. All right, so far, so good. But, you know, I got to address the elephant in the room when it comes to this printer. It's one of the biggest criticisms about HeyGears printers in general, and that's the proprietary nature of it all. The fact that you cannot use any other slicer except for the blueprint slicer, and the fact that they lean heavily into their resins, which are proprietary resins in these proprietary bottles. And this resin tends to cost more than others on the market. So a bottle like this will cost you around $45, $50, as opposed to the $20 bottles that you can typically find pretty much everywhere else. But I do have to stress that even though HeyGears wants you to use this resin, because through their testing is going to give you the best quality, the best results that they can actually vouch for, they are not required for you to use this printer. You can use third-party resins in this printer. Although it's not generally recommended, you can still do it because the printer doesn't know what resin is actually in the vat. It can just read the RFID tag so that it can communicate what bottle this is to itself and back to the slicer. But if you've got some less expensive resin and it's your favorite resin, you can still use this. And in fact, I really highly recommend that you check out this video from Greedy 3D where he has tried out different resins in the previous model of the UltraCraft Reflex with some really amazing results. So if that's kind of putting you off on it, just know that you can buy this resin, but you can also use the resin that you already have or resin that you already like. I also have to address the fact that the Blueprint slicer still does not let you change certain printing parameters, such as the exposure time, the different speeds. You can't change that. HeyGears has designed it so that they've taken all of that grunt work out. So you'll be able to get really nice quality prints right out of the gate without having to do all that. So that kind of fine control you are not going to get with this printer, but based on what I've been printing and seeing for my own eyes, the results are still really, really nice. Of course, it's one thing to just tell you about the printer, but the proof is going to be in how it can actually print and the quality of the prints that it can produce. So let's take a look at some things that I've done in my time using this printer and what my experiences have been. So now let's take a look at some sample prints. We got some miniatures right here. They're about the 32 millimeter scale or so. In the middle, I have this larger Cyclops, kind of like a toony Cyclops kind of a figure that came with a base. And then these two here of this Dracula and of this character right here, whose name I forget. These are 75 millimeter miniatures. And then here's a Piccolo from Dragon Ball that I found as well. You also see that there are some different colors here. The gray ones are from HeyGears' PAP 10 resin, and then the lighter color ones are the HeyGears PARP 10 resin, P-A-R-P. And all of these models printed without any failures whatsoever. Just ran them through the slicer, had it do the automatic supports, and then just printed them out. The print time estimates in the slicer are an over-exaggeration, which is a nice little surprise. I've had some prints, not these, that say that they're going to take about 12 hours to print that ended up finishing in about 9 hours. So the print times were not accurate, but they were always faster. The quality of these prints are really nice, and that's why I wanted to try with a variety of different sizes for this example. And this was all just no tweaking whatsoever, just letting the software in the printer do what it's going to do best. Let it do the automatic everything, automatic orientation, automatic supports, automatic repairs, automatic positioning on the build plate. It did all of that and just printed these out, and they look very nice as far as their details are concerned. No mishaps whatsoever. Now, one thing on these models that you'll probably notice as you look all the way around them is that there are some marks left over from the supports, which is a very common thing and expected thing with resin 3D printing. Usually just some light sanding will get rid of those raised bumps and get everything nice and smooth, especially if you're planning on painting them. The one thing that I wish I experienced that I've seen from reviews of the previous model were supports just coming off of the models like butter, as if there was nothing holding them to the model. And that just wasn't my experience with this. The supports were not difficult to remove, but I did have to apply some heat just to make things a little bit easier for me. So although I didn't have that buttery smooth release that I've seen some other YouTubers have for the previous model, the support generation was still very good, and removing the supports, it was not difficult, though I wish it were easier based on what I've seen in the past. I think this figure of the woman with the gun came out exceptionally well because there's such small, intricate details on her dress. You can see these crucifixes and these swirly patterns, and the curls in her hair was all replicated very, very beautifully with this printer. So you know I had to take advantage of the larger build plate, and I decided to print this Grim Knight statue, basically Batman with guns. And I used the ash gray water washable resin for this model. And I'm just so happy that that water washable resin is not brittle. It didn't break apart like shards of glass on the build plate. It was just as easy to work with as the regular PAP 10 resin, and this is the PAW 10 resin. And this model is separated into some different pieces. So you got the torso that's separate from the lower half, which is separate from the head, which is separate from the hands with the guns and the guns on the back. The base, however, is not printed in resin. It was printed on FDM just to save some of that resin, but this model came out looking very nice. And the layer height that I chose for him was not the 30 micron layer height, but instead I chose the 50 micron layer height just to see if the details would take a big noticeable hit or if I would not really like how it came out. And that is not the case. I think that this figure came out wonderfully. I think that is gorgeous. No failures whatsoever. And you can see all the nice intricate details on the barrel of the guns, even on the very tip. I think that's probably a silencer. And even that came out looking really, really good. Smooth print all the way around. I am very happy with how the Grim Knight turned out. And I also printed another one from Marvel. And because Wolverine is all the rage these days, I decided to print this Wolverine bust also from Wicked. Wolverine himself was made in the HeyGears PARP 10 resin, that's PARP 10 resin, and the base was made in FDM. So basically the PARP 10 resin has a more of a matte finish, and you can probably tell the difference between the surface look of this Wolverine compared to the Grim Knight. The Grim Knight looks a little bit shinier, but this one is nice and matte. And once again, everything just came out beautifully, no failures whatsoever. Even these claws here for Wolverine, they're all intact. And as for this Wolverine, I'm not seeing as many support marks, but he just looks absolutely fantastic. This printer just did a really amazing job. Great details from the muscles, the veins, the hair on Wolverine is all coming out, and it all printed wonderfully. So I'm currently working on a print right now, so you might hear some noise in the background, but what I have right here is the HeyGears wash station, and it consists of this base and a platform that moves in this circular motion just like this. And it's a very interesting way to wash your prints because it comes with a couple of these buckets here, and what they want you to do is stack the buckets and have the cleaning liquid move from one bucket to the other. So let me show you how that works. So here's how it's going to work basically. So you put your models inside one of the washing buckets, and then you put it down into here. You start it up, it goes around, it cleans. And when it's done, you're supposed to take one of these buckets, put it aside, and then you get the empty bucket and put that down. Then you take the full bucket and put it on top of the empty bucket. And then over on the side, there's this lever that you can turn that's going to drain the liquid from the first bucket to the empty bucket below. So for this test, I just put a little bit of water in here. So I just turn this knob here, and then I make sure that this air release valve thing is turned off, and that's at the very top of the bucket. And then you can see the water is draining from here and it's going into the bucket at the bottom. I think that is a somewhat overcomplicated way to go about cleaning your prints. What I would do instead is just continue to use the two wash method, where the first wash is going to be with a more dirty IPA, and then the second wash is with a cleaner IPA. And so one of these buckets will have the dirty IPA in it, and then I will just run a regular wash cycle as normal. And then I would just take it out of that wash bucket and then put it in the second wash bucket that has the cleaner IPA, and then just do a second cleaning round of that. And that way your IPA, your cleaner IPA, is going to last longer because you're not putting all of that residual resin into one container that has your alcohol or whatever cleaning solution that you're going to be using. You'll run through it more quickly if you only have a single wash. So the best thing that I think that you should do is just use one for dirty and then one for clean, and just kind of skip the whole stacking and draining aspect of it all. Take a look at these guns that I printed for the Grim Knight. Very nice detail on these guns, as usual. And it has a ton of supports. These are auto supports that it generated. Let's see how easy it's going to be to just take this off of the build plate. Being real careful about it. I like to go in at an angle and just try to get underneath it. Just like that. This is water washable, so I'm super happy it's not really brittle, like I've experienced with some other water washable resins in the past. Almost there. Boom. There we go. Nice and clean. I also wish that this was perforated like the last one was, so that that resin could actually seep through while it's in the printing process. All right, so I'm just going to toss this into the first vat. Dirty IPA. Before I do anything else, just put it in there like so. Ooh, look at that cloud. Disgusting resin cloud. Nice. All right, so now I'm gonna put this on. Do a standard wash of 3 minutes down in here at 160 rotations per minute. I don't know if that's necessary or whatever. Just going to let it do its thing for the next 3 minutes. And I'm going to get this build plate cleaned up so I can swap out this resin because, like I said, it is pretty smelly. All right, so it's a brand new day and I've got a fresh print that just finished up, and I thought this would be a great time to talk about the speed of the printer as well as some of the resin that I've been using. So as I said previously, the RS stands for Rapid Shaper, and HeyGears says that this is a great way to be able to rapidly prototype some parts and you can get them done in about 2 hours. For these miniatures that I'm going to show you right now, I printed those at a 50 micron layer height to see how long it was going to take. Now, these are pretty standard sized miniatures, with most of them being under 2 inches tall, and I was able to print them out in less than 2 hours. So if you had a whole plate full of miniatures, you can expect to get those done in less than 2 hours. I also wanted to test the accuracy of the fit of certain parts, and to do that, once again, I used miniatures because they're really small and I wanted to see how well those pieces will go together. So I printed out some miniatures that required multiple different parts to put together, just like you would in a kit, and those were finished in under 2 hours as well. And I was putting them together and I was very happy to see that they fit together very well. And in some cases, even the parts where I had to stick together, they were pretty well connected inside of the socket. Now, glue is something that was supposed to be used for these models, so I did use glue to get them to hold together somewhat permanently. But as you can see here with the shoulder guards, for example, I was able to socket in that shoulder piece to the arm piece, and it was in there pretty good without the use of any kind of glue. So I was very happy to see that those little small pieces were able to fit together, so the accuracy of those prints were pretty darn good. The model that I have in here now comes in at just under 3 inches tall from the bottom of the model to the top of the model. And with that 50 micron layer height, this ended up printing out in 3 hours and 16 minutes. So I can only imagine if I was able to print at 100 microns, it would be done a lot faster than that. But that was pretty much the time that I got. Now, going back to the resin, there's 3 types that I was able to test out. The first one is the PAP-10 resin. PAP-10 resin is best used for miniatures, statues, and things that require a lot of fine detail. I was also able to try out their PAW-10 resin, that's PAWW, and that is simply water washable resin with a layer height of 50 microns. And then the final one is the PARP-10 resin, the resin that was recommended recommended for getting the rapid shaper function to work properly. If you're curious about the smell out of all of those, I found that the water washable resin was the one that emitted the most odor. So what I have inside of here right now is the PAP 10 resin, and even though this is wide open, I can smell something, but it is not bad at all. The worst and strongest smelling resin was definitely the PAW 10 water washable resin, and that is why in the portion where I was talking about this washer here and how that worked, my voice sounded weird because I was wearing a respirator, because that smell, it was quite pronounced, and I was like, I've got to wear a respirator because this stuff is pretty strong. So if odor is something that you are very sensitive to, wearing a respirator is always the best choice. But if you're not going to do it, I think that the PAW 10 resin is going to give you the most trouble as far as the smell goes. All right, so let's talk about price. Right now, the PAP 10 resin, HeyGears charges $59 for that 1 kilogram bottle. And for the PARP 10 resin, the cost currently is $45 for that 1 kilogram bottle. However, HeyGears is going to change that. They are going to repackage it and redesign the PARP 10 resin. They're going to call it PAS 10. And one of the other changes that they're going to do is they're going to redesign the bottle. So the bottle is not going to have that little ball in there for the automatic resin refill feature that this printer has. They're going to take that out, and as a result, the resin is going to cost less than what it does currently. Now, I know this video has been going on for a while, and I want to thank you for sticking around for this long, but I thought it was very important for you to know all the ins and outs of this printer if you're going to be spending your hard-earned money on it. And now I can talk about the pros and cons of the UltraCraft Reflex RS. Now, one of the cons, let's start with the bad news. One of the cons that I do have to say is the fact that they took away the ability to take the plate and tilt it so that the resin drains into the vat. That was a feature that was on the previous model, but the build plate is different this time around, and also the way that you connect the build plate to the Z-axis is also different this time around. So instead of being able to put it into a slot and tilt it, they instead have a part that you can 3D print yourself and put on the end of the vat, and then just simply take the build plate and slot it in and then have it drip that way. So even though that is an option, I wish that it was something that was standard on the printer so that you didn't have to print it out yourself. The other thing about that workaround is, in order to feel the safest as far as not spilling resin in places you don't want it to go, then this has to lift all the way up to the top. Otherwise, the plate is going to be too tall and it's going to get in the way of that Z arm, and it's just not as convenient to use. So when you're finished with the print, you have to go into the settings and tell it to lift all the way up, because it doesn't lift all the way up when the print is done, like you can see here, and then you'll be able to more comfortably slot that in for that resin to drip. The other thing that I wish that they had kept from the previous model is the perforated build plate, because that one had holes in it. So when the build plate goes down and comes out of the resin, then it gives that resin an ability to drain back into the vat without you having to tilt it all the time. And unless you manually drain it by tilting it, either by hand or by using that 3D printed attachment piece, you're just going to be wasting the resin that is gathered on top. So I wish they had kept that perforated build plate just for that particular feature. This printer also does not mix the resin like the previous one does. Before you start to print on the previous model, it would go up and down, just sort of mixing the resin before it started to print. This one currently does not do that. And I'd imagine that's something that can be fixed, or added, I should say, in firmware. But as of right now, it does not do that. Now, since I got this printer, I have updated the firmware about 3 times right now, and it's currently on version 0.7 something. So that tells me that we're not even on version 1.0 yet. So there's probably going to be some more features added in the future, and hopefully the resin mixing will be one of them, but it's just not available right now. But I can only review what I have in front of me. Another thing that I wish this model had, which is not really a big deal, but it'd still be nice to have, is the ability for the printer to know how much resin is in the vat and how much resin is in the bottle, and then communicate that through either the Slicer or the Blueprint Go mobile app. I know that the previous version of this printer can do that, but I have not been able to get it to transfer that kind of information. And now I don't think that it can do that. Now, that's not a huge deal because you do have marks on the vat itself that tells you the approximate level of how much resin that you have in there. So all you have to do is just kind of look. And I always check to make sure whether or not I have enough resin before I start to print anyway, just with a visual check. So it's not a huge deal, but just as far as the technology aspect of it goes, it would be a nice thing to see. But now let's talk about the pros. And yes, there are pros. The biggest pro is it's a phenomenal printer. The whole point of a Resin 3D printer is to be able to print some very nice, nicely detailed, highly detailed, and dimensionally accurate models, and to make it simple. And that's what this printer does. Everything that I've printed, from little tiny small parts to larger bits of the statue, I haven't had a single failed print. Not one failed print, not one thing has gone wrong with this printer. And the only thing that I've ever done was turn it on. I've not gone into the menus and done any manual calibrations. I haven't done anything. I've just told the printer what to print, and it's printed them. And it has been very, very, very awesome to use thus far. So if the main thing that you want to know is how does this printer print, that's what it's supposed to do. It does that phenomenally well. Another pro that I want to give is to the Blueprint Slicer. I know some people may not like the fact that it's proprietary and you can't use Chi2 Box or Lychee. You can't use any of those other slicers. And I get it because you're comfortable with what you're comfortable with. But the Blueprint Slicer, I still think, is a very good slicer. It doesn't give you that fine control that you have in other slicers, but what it does do, it does very well. You got all the basic features as far as your scaling and your rotating and being able to hollow out your prints and making holes, and you can still do all of that stuff. And if you want to have more fine control over your supports, they do give you the option to do that. There is an advanced setting for the supports where you can set little parameters to best fit your needs when it comes to support. So even though you can't control the exposure time and speed of this and speed of that, you still have control over the most primary functions that most people will be using with a Resin 3D printer. And the one-click slice option is very convenient because it does automatic repairing, orienting, support generation, arranging on the build plate. It does all of that in a single click, and it takes care of all that stuff for you. Like I said, if you want to have more control over where your supports go, if you want to arrange it on the build plate yourself, if you want to tilt the model yourself, you can still do that. But the results of just letting the slicer be the slicer and do it for you has always been successful to me. Now let's talk about the accessories and the wash station and the cure station. And although these are not required to use this printer, they are available for you if you do want to pick them up. Now, the wash station, it does a really good job at washing your prints, but at the end of the day, all it's really doing is moving your prints around in your cleaning solution. And the way that they have designed these two buckets to stack on top of each other and to drain the liquid from one to the other, I mean, I get it, but I do think it's a little too complicated, a little over-engineered, if you will. I do like the fact that you can change the rotations per minute in order to get the strength of a wash that you want, and it can connect to Wi-Fi, so you'll be able to take the data from the cloud if you want to use the cloud from your print, and it will send it to the wash station in order to help you wash more efficiently. That's nice, but it's just a wash station at the end of the day. It does its job, but it just does it in a more complex way. And then you have the cure station. Now, the cure station is pretty darn cool. It is a very nice size. You can cure a good number of things inside of there, as well as some larger pieces as well. It also has a heating function, so you can use it to sort of dry your prints if they're a little bit wet, or if you're painting something, you could pop it in there and put it on the bake setting and change the temperature and provide some heat for your model. So I like that two option approach that this offers. And it also is connected to Wi-Fi in order to give you some optimal cure time. And just so you know, besides the whole cloud aspect of it all, you can just use these individually without having to use this printer, you know. So if you got multiple 3D printers and you just want to have one wash station and one cure station, this can still take care of things just like any other wash and cure station can. So overall, I have really enjoyed the weeks that I have had with this printer and this wash station and this cure station from HeyGears. This is a really, really great printer. And if you're looking for something of, I would say, more of a medium-sized printer, something that you don't have to worry about babysitting so much and trying to figure out settings and doing a lot of tinkering and calibration models and all that stuff, then this is the type of printer that you're going to want to have. And I think for that launch price of $799, HeyGears is really trying to be good and competitive this time around. So if you are interested in that and you want to pick it up and at the same time you want to help out the channel, again, there's a link in the description. You'll also be able to get the $50 off during that promotional period for this printer and the combo if you want to pick up the combo as well. So like I said, this has been a very long video, but if there's anything that I left out that you are curious about, please let me know down in the comments so I can take a look and I will answer as many of them as I possibly can. And I'll also be making some more videos featuring this printer and Resin 3D printing in the future as well. So stick around for that and subscribe if you are interested. But that is all for now. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Till next time, take care of yourselves and I'll speak to you soon.